So your hireability is basically like when an employer looks at your resume, how hireable are you? How marketable are you to a company who's looking for new employees? So this is what they're specifically looking for. Just so you guys know, I set up 15 to 20 interviews a week. My office alone has close to 100 people going to work per week. So I work with a lot of different employers, a lot of different people who, and this is a lot of the consensus from all of them. When they're digging into resumes, they're seeing candidates who are leaving for poor reasons. You know, Trudy just talked about a couple of them, and it's all about just how you're phrasing it and your verbiage. So if you're saying, you know, I left because I didn't agree with management, you can always spin it and make it sound a little bit better where, oh, I'm leaving because I'm ready to find a better opportunity that better suits me, kind of thing. Those reasons for leaving are explainable. However, there are some reasons for leaving that are not explainable that I think that we really need to educate students on, that these will come back. This comes back around. So if you do have poor attendance, if you are no call, no showing for work or for interviews, this is your reputation. And, you know, again, that could be an instant disqualifier. And it's these small details that are in between candidates and actually landing a job and actually getting a job. So again, echoing the previous slide from Trudy, speaking positively about your previous employers, even if you had a negative experience. So I can speak to this. I worked at Target for about a year and it was a little tough. It was a little tough going through a holiday season there. But, you know, when I was interviewing for a new job, I didn't say, oh, it sucked and it was the worst ever. No, I just said, hey, you know, it just wasn't really a fit anymore. And I'm looking for more growth within my career. And that's just a nice, polite way to say it wasn't working out anymore. So then another thing employers are looking for is job tenure. How long are candidates sticking with a specific company? So the longer stints or the longer time you're spending with companies, the more marketable and the more hireable you are to employers. That's what they're looking for, is people who have that tried and true, they've shown their follow through, they've shown their dedication, they've stuck it out for a few years with a couple different employers. They also know then that you're not going to be a job hopper, that you're not just going to leave that position then for $1 more, $2 more an hour kind of thing. So then going hand in hand with that is references and letters of recommendation. So if you are leaving a company and you have burned bridges and you have had poor attendance or no call, no showed, it's going to be really tough getting those managers on board to be your reference or your letter of recommendation. So I think just teaching students reciprocity as a whole is huge. And again, that goes back to networking, just who you know and making sure you're constantly putting your best foot forward. And in addition to that is ghosting. This is kind of the new verbiage that we're using for just not communicating. And this is a huge thing that I'm seeing in the industry where people are just not communicating. They'll just stop talking completely. And this is something we need to be teaching our students is not okay, that they need to be communicative. And sometimes it could just be those little things that are in between you and getting a job. And I think we can jump to the next slide.
Also with ghosting, and
we
still need to teach our students that there is a 2 weeks notice is the proper amount that you give before you leave one job and go to another. That standard still applies across the board, that Absolutely. You don't just quit one day and not show up the next. So the 2 weeks notice is still really important to teach our students. It's still a standard.
Absolutely. Sorry. So I had a candidate who started, or excuse me, I had 3 candidates who had started this week. I don't even remember how I said it.
Just didn't have a ride.
Oh, that's right. I had a gal who started at a company yesterday, and it was something as simple as just not even being able to get a ride to work and not even being able to, and it took her all day to even let us know. And it's something we can work with people, and employers can work with people when they're communicative and saying, hey, I'm late, or hey, I can't catch a ride. But it's just about that communication piece. And as you said, Trudy, the 2 weeks is still very much a thing that needs to happen. And this is a tough slide here, compliance issues. just because it doesn't really fit anywhere. So it's a little out of place, but I still feel like it's something important that we need to talk about and make sure we're educating kids on, is that you've gone through, you've done all of the research, you've gone through the process of being interviewed, you got the job, awesome. Well, now what? Well, now you have to go through compliance. And many employers, almost all, require a drug screen and a background check. And a lot of times students and kids don't realize this, especially with us living in Washington State and marijuana being legal. You know, moving forward, obviously, once they're at the correct age, they may not know that then the employers are still screening for those things. They're still doing drug screens. And that could, again, be their downfall in not being able to move forward with the job and not being able to keep the job that they just landed and they just did all that work for. So just educating that drug screens are very, very common and will happen at almost all places of employment. And in addition to that is background checks. Again, almost all clients, or excuse me, almost all companies that I work with, they require background checks. So it's tough that that's the way that the corporate world is, but I think it's just important to at least educate students and kids that you know, some of these things that may seem like a good idea, they can really end up coming back later on in life and making things hard to get a job. Again, if you just have something on your background, could be just that one small thing that stands in between. And then finally, education verification is actually really, really common. That was the statistic I was going to say, is this week I had 3 people start and 2 of them had to go through an education verification. And all it is the employer is just reaching out to the high school and saying, hey, did this person get a high school diploma or GED, and just verifying that. It seems silly, but that's what employers do. So we need to just at least make sure our kids know going into these things, before even interviewing, that at the end of this, there's going to be these compliance pieces that they'll have to go through.
And a couple of other tips for kids nowadays with virtual interviews. If they're interviewing online, you want to also teach them to sit at the webcam, to actually dress professionally. And then my recommendation is that when they're talking to their employer, whether it's prior to an interview, if they actually stand up and talk on the phone, make sure they have a good connection, make sure they're not driving down the road or they're on their, Bluetooth speaker on the car. Those kind of sort of reminders, and especially dressing professionally on any virtual Zoom type interviews is really important. And as most of us teachers know, our kids don't turn on their cameras. And when they do turn on their cameras, they're in their pajamas. So just a few more minutes after the interview, I recommend a thank you email if possible. If it's possible to email your employer. Sometimes I tell kids, hey, don't be afraid to ask for a business card or some sort of contact information for the person you interviewed with, and send that thank you email in 24 hours. After 24 hours, the thank you follow-up becomes a little outdated. And I actually give them a sample so that they can use it. It needs to be really short, really brief, but just to reiterate that you are interested in working in that company and that you look forward to hearing from them. And then, of course, locking up social media, right? Most of our kids are using Snapchat these days. Some still have Twitter accounts, but a lot have Instagram. They make their profiles public because that's what they do. So obviously they need to hide that profile. They need to actually think about using social media as a way to help them get hired by putting things on social media that are, assets like a professional image, any sort of creativity, especially in jobs in like marketing and communications. Things that show that they can write correctly, that they can communicate correctly. 54% of employers have actually eliminated candidates based on social media posts. That's an Inc.com article. I shared the link with you. So it still applies. It's still applicable, even though most of our kids don't use Facebook, Instagram. applies. And yes, most employers Google their candidates. I do when I interview here at the high school for classified or certificated personnel. I always Google everybody. Final thoughts. I have 1 minute. Let's see if I can get through this. We have to tell our kids that, you know, yeah, some of this stuff seems really unfair, that you have to go through all these hoops to get a job. And that's not who you are. That's not how the world works anymore in their bubble. But they need to understand that they're probably going to be interviewed by baby boomers, Gen Xers, or even millennials, and they are Generation Z, right? So, especially our high school students are Gen Zs, and they have this different mindset than baby boomers and Gen Xers when it comes to what is appropriate, what is protocol for resumes, cover letters, and interviewing. So I actually spend some time with my kids talking about different generations, what's out there, what does it mean to baby boomers, what are they looking for? I had a student tell me the other day, because we're doing this in class, this is good timing, they said, I'm going to wait till all the baby boomers retire before I apply for a job. I said, okay. And then my experience also is this shouldn't be difficult for students. We should be really helping them cross that bridge from high school to college to work, and give them examples. Don't make them start from scratch because you think that is the ethical thing to do as a teacher. I'm going to make my kids work for it. Actually really say, here, here's some things you can copy this, change a few names, change a few letters, change a few words, but don't make them have to start from scratch. It is not cheating if they copy a cover letter and they just change it up so it works for their job. That's okay. Same with resume templates, same thing. And I just think giving them those tools is so much more helpful than making them sort of struggle through creating a cover letter from scratch or creating a resume from scratch. And I know, Kylie, you've worked with a lot of students too in the past. Do you want to talk about your sort of takeaways from that?
So, did you want to jump in really quick?
I know we're running out of time. There was just so much information. So if you can hang on for just a couple more minutes, I know we're at the end, and I greatly appreciate your time. I know a couple of you have to pop off, but I'll let Kylie keep going.
Yeah, and I can keep this super brief. I just wanted to let you guys know that I've done this a couple times with classes, Capital High School classes actually. And so these were actual real student feedback that we got after doing those presentations. So those comments are listed on this slide, and you guys can go ahead and review those once we get the PowerPoint sent over to you later this week.
Okay. So last but not least, is it me? Sorry, yes. I was reading the chat. Take Charge Today, Next Gen Personal Finance. These are two websites that I have found some really good resources. And when I mean resources, I mean they talk about interviewing, they talk about resumes, they talk about cover letters. There's lots of places that sort of give you information on resumes, but what I like about Take Charge Today and Next Gen Personal Finance is that they have true lessons from kind of start to finish. And Take Charge Today is really good because they have lessons for middle school and early high school into 11th and 12th graders. Next Gen Personal Finance, I will warn you, is not necessarily vetted, and some of their stuff can be a little outdated. But I know a lot of teachers do like it. I personally like Take Charge Today. Both of them require that you open an account that's free, so don't worry about that. And if you haven't been to these two websites, go there. There's so much information about anything personal finance, including really good career units. And if you have any resources to share, please feel free to do that on the chat or anything. And I will stay on for questions. And I'm sure Kylie will stay on for questions as well. Yep. So we'll stay on another 10 or 15 minutes if you would like to ask questions, or for either of us to review anything we've gone over. Yeah. Other than that, if you are leaving, thank you for being here.
Yes, and on behalf of FEP, I want to thank these two ladies for their time today. And we are so grateful that all of you teachers, you're my heroes, and you're doing great work out there. So thank you. And if you need to pop off, we get it, but we'll be on for a few more minutes and you can unmute to ask questions.